Most people are in fog, and they're sort of not quite knowing their purpose and very weak sense of presence. It was a secret weapon. I'd essentially weaponized my mind as to being something that was working with me. But if you can get the presence piece right, which is this.
I'm delighted to welcome Mark Randall, who has over 40 years experience in the financial markets, and is also the co-founder of the AlphaMind Project.
I'm so in the present and I'm so focused on just existing and paying attention to it. I could tell that, and actually others could tell that from me because I was more positive, more engaging, so people would come and talk to me.
You can almost look from the outside in, right? Whereas people are stuck in something, they can't find their way out. Whereas you come in with a new approach and you're actually looking at completely differently because
Absolutely.
you see the problems, the issues, or what brought you into that situation in the first place.
We have general intelligence, we have emotional intelligence. I think there's another thing called presence as an intelligence. If you're the one that's super calm, in control, really curious with an open mind to what's evolving, because when you're under stress, which is basically you've turned yourself into a Neanderthal.
You're going to lose your trading edge, right? I mean,
You've
you just
lost
can't.
your edge.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
if you're rating yourself against the edge of others, you have a tactical advantage if your edge is the best it can be, knowing that everyone else seems to be relatively stressed and unmanaged, which is the state of the market, even in the professional world.
What's the difference between, would you say, from like retail traders in the market to a high-performing hedge fund manager, and how they deal with things differently? Like both sides of this, both types of people, can they have the same mentality? Can they get into that same, especially for retail traders going into like full-time trading, especially who rely on that money?
Well,
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Two Blokes Trading. I'm delighted to welcome Mark Randall, who has over 40 years experience in the financial markets, and is also the co-founder of the AlphaMind Project. Thank you so much for coming on with us today, Mark.
Yeah, very good to be here. Looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a chat with Stephen, your colleague, last week as well. And after the chat, we kind of explained to me how in depth do you go into kind of mindfulness, and I really want to kind of explore that more for our listeners.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I think it's going to be very interesting and important that we do.
Absolutely, 100%. I think it's something, we kind of touched on it last week, that lots of people use psychology and the word psychology in the wrong ways, and how in depth that we can go into mindfulness and the importance of psychology in a slightly separate way.
Yeah, it's a much confused word, as is meditation, as is mindfulness. So the context of how it fits in with trading, it's let's see if we can enlighten some people today.
Absolutely. So you have an extensive experience in the background. Let's start there. Let's go back to day one. Obviously, you're on the trading floors, right?
Yes. Well, day one was sort of the 9 months to a year before life market began in 1982, when I was, as a young kid, but they put into something called, it was the Treasury Department of NatWest Bank, and it was seconded to futures. And we were shown these books that were forward and pricing things for Eurodollar futures, and some pictures of a pit, but we had no videos of it. We had no real clue what it was, apart from running this thing called futures. And that existed for quite a while, until one particular day we went down to a room in Old Jury near Bank Station, and where us potential traders all got together, and it was about, we were going to find out what it was about. And a chap from a commodity market turned up, and we had these sort of false orders, and we still didn't have a clue what we had to be doing all day long. We had this thing: do we sit around, do we tap things in, or? And this guy turned up in a jacket and started screaming, and we all looked at each other and thought, we got to do this all day. That then was, led us to getting organized, and it became day one on the futures market, which began at, I think, the early contracts. It was like a 9:30 a.m. start, and it was like a 3:15 p.m. finish. So sort of along the way that the stock exchange worked. And it was a very gentlemanly start. There were only about 300 of us on the market on day one. And I did the first trade for NatWest, I remember at the time. Scared me stiff. I worked out notional value was like 15 million sterling. And like, and the challenge of that day was that we're in this ancient building, the Royal Exchange. And this was open-outcry, jackets and everything. And the most difficult thing was actually being in this cavernous, big, ancient hall shouting at the top of your voice. And you might be the only voice. It might be a quiet day and you're there saying, 50 at 5 and 50, but and actually being in a big space like that and being the only voice actually shouting and, shouting out something. I mean, that's quite, not something that's normal, right? So we had to you just get used to projecting yourself and being present to the occasion of it. And, so it began with a very gentlemanly kind start, and it got sort of busy at times, and flows were sort of building as the market got to understand the relevance of futures as part of the jigsaw of the evolution of markets. And I was more of an artist than a mathematician. I was no way a mathematician. And I started to understand, and the pre-idea about markets was it was all about maths, but it wasn't. And I actually learned that and picked up early technical analysis skills from a local that came over from Chicago to join in some of the liquidity. And very, very quickly got a reputation as one of the very early on-floor technical analysts. And that allowed me to have an opinion of the market. And that was really, really important to have a view. Mathematically looking at numbers, you couldn't really get a view. But if you understood the ebb and flow and the structure and the character of the market, you were able to give an opinion as to where it might go next.
What tools were you using for that? Do you mind me asking?
Okay. Pencil, paper, point and figure. Jonathan, you need to understand, this was early 1980s.
Yeah. 80s, yeah.
I think the ZX Spectrum had just come out at that stage to give you a clue about, where computing was.
So literally, we're drawing graphs and trying to find
patterns.
Wow.
Point and figure reversal manually.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Manually. And we had back at base in the office, we had ADP Comtrend at the time. But anyway, so I developed a skill of making note of market movement and having an opinion as to where it might go next and having a view and building up those skills of market observation, which is kind of like made me feel the ticker and the mood of the market because you're so focused on price. But the thing about being on the floor and as a we were all alternates, so we could be in the booth. We were traders, we were runners. We were doing, that's how it was structured. You did a bit of everything. But when you were trading, we were the price. When the price turned up on the global screens that had traded, that was me doing that in the pit. Yeah. And the size of it turned up. We never had depth in those days. You couldn't see the depth of the market like you do now. Sure. But you could feel the market. We were the price.
Yeah.
We were that price, and historically our names are linked to all those prices that we were physically involved with. Yeah. And there are moments it got busy, but then I learned that busy was measurable in different levels of busyness. And those skills, and I was a golfer as well, so I got a big reputation. I tended to win things, and there were 3 or 4 of us that did very well in all the golf outings. So you get a nice reputation. I was a reputation as a chartist or technical analyst. So you had to have something to be relevant to, have conversations and build different types of networks and friendships on the floor, and have a reason behind, what you couldn't just be a face. You had to have like a nickname, and I was Randy because Mark Randall was Randy, and I did the chart stuff and I did the golf, but I was part of the gang. So I guess that skill set then got me evolved onto the desk itself, onto the broking desk, because they were very valuable skills to face really, really big clients with. And historically, the people facing the clients were super senior managers. But I wasn't a super senior manager, but my skill set was more relevant to the client than a super senior manager's sort of career experience. Wow. So that got me onto the desk for a while. And then in the late 80s, we lost a team to one of the other banks, and because I still got a trader badge behind me, you see on the wall there.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's still there, still there.
Very good.
But I was, I was licensed to trade options and futures, and so it's like, Randall, you're going back on the floor. So I had to go back on the floor then, and the floor had evolved to being a lot more people, still on a Royal Exchange, but Thatcher, liberalization of flows, market, I guess, got bigger.
Yeah.
The hedge funds, more leverage stuff was coming in. Product range had widened out, and it was busier. And it wasn't so much of a gentleman's market anymore. It had moments of chaos, and you could start to see what pain meant in terms of, because there were people running their own money on the floor, some locals.
Really?
And you could see what difficult meant to them. Bad days. You could also see what difficult meant to people that were coping with huge amounts of flow manually being fed at them, into a physical structured pit to be then traded, physically. And you keeping a track of what you've done, what you've not done, what balance you've done, what's been cancelled, what's been shifted, the fact you've now been given a spread to do. And you've got to be reporting that constantly back to the boothers saying, what have you done? And you're in the middle.
And you're trying to work out your P&L.
Yeah, and I'd say that the busiest time I had there, this is quite funny, and this is about realizing that markets can get busy for stupid reasons. Like we've seen recently, markets can suddenly, you think it's busy, but there's suddenly another level of being busy that can occur. And this was, so bear in mind that the Eurodollar futures pit was in London, as we had a little pit in London that was fungible with Singapore, I think, at the time. And we also had a T-bond pit. Now, the Eurodollar pit was probably, I don't know, 20 foot by 20 foot type area, something like that. The T-bond bit was about the size of my bathroom. It was sort of, it was like 10 foot by 15 foot or something. So that was a T-bond pit. Anyway, so this particular day, something like retail sales was coming out. So it was a big number. And back in the day, their non-farm payroll wasn't so much an event, actually. The employment data wasn't such an event as it is now. M1 was a more important thing at the time, and retail stuff. Anyway.
Why was that not a gauge?
Pardon?
Why was that not used as a gauge, do you think?
I just think there are trends in the market, background policy, Fed economics, what we're looking at.
Just the president
used to be really, really important. Not quite, but they're all important. But the M1 numbers on a Friday night were super significant. Everyone was getting phone calls about what they were. Not so much now, or maybe So
True.
Themes of what to watch and what to understand influences the market change. And that's an important message for people that are listening to this type of dialogue. So anyway, go back to the story. So something like retail sales were coming out. Chicago had a power cut. Okay, so the IMM, CME, had a power cut. Well, actually, Chicago per se had a power cut. So the Chicago Board of Trade couldn't function, and Eurodollars on the IMM couldn't function. So the only place on the planet for the entire global flow of Eurodollars across all of the depth of that market, treasury bonds was T-bonds the size of my bathroom area, and 20 foot by 20 foot space in London, where everyone was suddenly involved in trading, and it kicked off, and the data was probably not as is expected either. That, if I was to look back and think, when did chaos turn into totally chaotic? That was chaos, because I was in the middle of that trying to trade, and it was like the pit observers trying to track price action just gave up. So they declared fast markets several times. No prices were held. You probably had 3 or 4 different prices trading at the same time in that pit.
It's not enough liquidity.
Spilled off into the sort of the space between the pits and the booths. It was so busy, and people were trading. And so when people say I've had a busy day, I look back and think, yeah, but it wasn't as busy as that day.
And did the lights come back on at any stage? They went back in?
Yeah, Chicago woke up and it started to get back to normal. But it goes to show that there are stresses and strains in this market that can come from very different angles, and and that would have impacted quite a few people. But so that was my early days of the futures market, and that was important to my DNA as being a market participant. be it on broker, be it on sales, and we were given in the early days some books of risk to manage and whatnot. But of course, that matured me through the years, and I was running the Greenwich NatWest broking desk as well, which was a super high flow business. Greenwich Capital were, considered one of the ultimate businesses at that time. NatWest acquired, and they then ran our futures business out of Greenwich. And we always answer the phone Greenwich because it's much cooler answering the phone Greenwich than NatWest.
And do you still keep your fingers in the pie at the moment? Are you still trading?
Yeah, I've got some risk on at the moment. I'm very happily long of gold, so I will say no more than that. I have other things, but I tend to keep it simple, really. Luckily, I had a nice pension when I retired, and so that I guess allows me to play with stuff.
Like the beauty of times like this, I mean, we've seen it time and time again. We look at COVID, we look at all the other times that these markets just kind of scale out of control. It's like, it's the simple moves. It's understanding where the money's going to move to. As soon as chaos comes into the market, there's always opportunities.
Yeah, it was interesting. Well, back in '87, it was chaos. I mean, it was real when that crash happened then. I mean, I was participating in the market then, obviously. That was nasty. I mean, you had treasury bond futures that were sort of one big point wide bid and offer, and they'd trade the big point up. Then there'd be like the next big point offered was the offer. Eurodollar futures were 50 ticks wide bid and offer. Not one went to 50 ticks wide. And that was going on for a period of time, while stocks were continuing to tank. Like whatever it was, like 30% or whatever. I know we did 11 or 12% recently here, but this was, you were watching a collapse happen. There was a movement into gold, and interesting enough, the chaos got so chaotic. I remember that there was a point where people started to sell gold, and they started to sell it because people it got so chaotic, the risk, people thought they just wanted cash. People were coming out of gold. So gold came off because people were liquidating gold just to get...
Probably getting margin calls and all that.
Cash was king.
Yeah,
because that was the level of panic. That didn't happen this time round. Obviously, we're still getting an updraft in, reallocation of global risk into safety. And the one thing I'd say about the safety trade is that, in the broader market sense, you've got the credit market, you've got corporate debt doing one thing, you've got US Treasury bills versus Eurodollars. So you've got bank risk, Eurodollar deposits against US government risk under T-bills. So the TED spread, T-bills, Eurodollar spread, is something that really starts to move when you've got these global dynamics kicking off, where people are questioning, big macro themes. So you can get caught out if you're trading, short term. If you're an account, you got to be aware of the fact that there could be bigger things going on. These shifts into quality, flight to quality and flight out of quality as people unwind that. Great shifts in the curves because inflation expectations start to change, and so you get curve risk as well. So a lot of spreads are going on. I think if you're a lonesome retail trader looking at your product, you perhaps need to be stepping back a little bit and thinking about these other things that might be going on that might turn up as sudden surprise when you're not expecting it, and it can take you offside quick. The other thing I've mentioned about these times is that people also need to be aware that there starts to become a system risk too. So you start to get people having margin calls that they might not be able to cover, and as a consequence, it puts huge pressure on whatever business that they are clearing through or accounting with. So, historically, you see businesses going to the wall, and people linked to those businesses accessing the market having to be somewhat on hold because their monies might be tied up in some way with those businesses trying to get themselves shipshape again or even survive. And you get this systemic risk of, it's not just you think, I've got market risk, but actually things can get so busy and nasty that actually the markets get hot. But there is this other risk that appears where the system, I know that the gilt market had significant problems a few weeks ago, to the point where Mohammed Al-Iran was saying that its integrity as a market was lost, felt like it was lost for a moment, and I think that was at a time when tariffs got reversed a little bit and the T-bond market, US, stabilized. But if the US has a cold, the UK cashes a cold as well. And our gilt market went through some significant angst for a period of time. Now, if you're trading gilt futures as a trader, and that market starts to go, go into a state of, 5 standard deviations away from normal behavior, you can get caught in a wind that can wipe you out in seconds.
For sure. And I tell you what, I really want to dig deeper into you as a person as well, in terms of looking at your profile. You've always had a big emphasis around mindfulness, even going back to like working around with the Shaolin monks at one stage I saw. And that seemed to have driven the rest of your kind of progress within learning around kind of psychology, NLP, everything around mental resistance and resilience, if you like. And I really want to hear more about that and how that you've approached that mindsetness, how you help people now, and also how you bring that into the markets when you're maybe having a bad day, or how you reset yourself.
Late 80s again, had trauma, dealing with flow, nervous, panic attacks. I had to get off trains because I felt I was running out of air, but it was all linked to super amounts of stress. Just thought, shit, this is bad. I had arthritis come on at the same time, so I was on 1,800 milligrams of ibuprofen to deal with arthritis, and a spine that was fusing. So and I went to my mother's once, and she looked at me and said, "What the hell's the matter with you?" And I said, "No, what's the matter with you?" Mothers are like, they sort of, there's something wrong. Tell me about it. And she said, "Okay, well, your grandmother was really interested in healing." Well, really? She passed away, so I had no point of reference there. So my mother said, "Go and find a book on healing." Christ, I went to a library. Then you can go to the internet, go to physical library, and it was a big ask to find any book on it. I found a research paper that was something about a book that was coming. I managed to find it, and it was about just doing these mental exercises. It really resonated with me, and I started to think, this is interesting. You could take your mind on these little journeys and use the breath and stuff like that, but they were very linked to visualization, but storytelling with a purpose. And you took yourself through the story, as well as some focus stuff around breathing. Now, I'd previously done some of that in Kung Fu, but it was like, I'd sort of forgotten about it. And that sort of re-triggered this thing. Yeah, there was that question of course, Kung Fu is about defense and offense and balance and poise and all of these types of, very graceful but very potent. And so I relearned that process. And over the course of about a month of me putting in place these things that were free, because it was down to my discipline and my approach to commit to doing them, and think, I'm going to carry this on and see what happens. Well, after 1 month, I was off of 1,800 ibuprofen down to just 300 just for the night. That's just to be able to allow sleep to happen. Doctor was like, couldn't believe it. I was functioning at work at a different level. I just felt I was just tuned in. I was so calm. It was chaotic, but I was just super calm. I also felt smarter. I felt that intelligence, whatever that means, had taken a notch forward. It also felt like I'd realized I'd been living in a black and white world of mono sound, a bit like Dorothy pre-tornado in Wizard of Oz. And I suddenly kicked down these doors, and it's like, Christ, it's HDMI, full color, Dolby Atmos sound surround, or whatever it was at the time, right? And I walked into a different world. And of course, that then woke me up to being in a sense of the markets, being able to see opportunity, being able to see networks where others had, they were all stuck in this fog and black and white world if they were lucky. Most people are in fog, and they're sort of not quite knowing their purpose and very weak sense of presence. But if you can get the presence piece right, which is this, you just having an appreciation of, thoughts, not paying attention though, because I'm so in the present and I'm so focused on just existing and paying attention to it. And I had this level of awareness that was over and above what anyone else had. And I could tell that. And actually others could tell that from me because I was more positive, more engaging. So people would come and talk to me openly. And so you
can almost
better very efficient networks. But
you can almost look from the outside in, right? Whereas people are stuck in something they can't find their way out. Whereas you come in with a new approach and you're actually looking at completely differently because
absolutely.
you see the problems, the issues, or what brought you into that situation in the first place.
So it was a secret weapon. I'd essentially weaponized my mind as to being something that was working with me and for me. And I actually recently coined the phrase, we have general intelligence, we have emotional intelligence.
Yep.
I think there's another thing called presence as an intelligence. That if you can understand presence and get presence and make it part of your life to be as present as possible. Now, you're never going to be 100% present all the time. Even Djokovic will tell you that. It's about noticing you've drifted away from being present and recovering back to being present when you're in this war of markets. And it's not a game. People call it a game. It's not a game. It's war. Okay, there's more like combat than it is like. And I'm actually co-writing a book with Dr. Ken Long, who's U.S. Army, also a trader, using military techniques to talk about it. It's taken a while because it's like doing your homework. I think that it's like being given 800 words of English homework to do on like a Sunday night. I think, geez.
Yeah. Well, once that's ready,
it's coming, guys and girls. It'll be there at some point. But getting back to my point, so I created a weapon that allowed me to flourish in markets and build big clients, interesting clients that others weren't even thinking about. But I was having the tenacity to join the dots up and to follow them through. Stress wasn't something that was occurring, and I was just in flow moments of just dealing with it, almost as a dance. I wasn't clunky. Everything was quite well balanced, and I was conducting, my performance in this very aggressive space in a way that not many others were. Rolling all the way forward to around about 2010, and we'd gone through so many changes. So somebody came into the business for like a lunchtime lunch and learn, come and get your CPD points for your review, that one of those things. And this fella turned up with something called mindfulness that I'd never heard of before. And I thought, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is all the stuff I've been doing for like 30 years. But this guy was totally useless. He had no story to tell. He'd read it out of a book somewhere. Yeah. So I approached HR and said, okay, I want to run a pilot with you, facing markets people, but stylized to suit the market's agenda, based upon my experience of managing trauma and optimizing my state as an operative in markets. And they took me up on it. Anyway, so I ran the pilot, and very, 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 very quickly, it went viral. And very, very quickly, it went bank wide. I mean, people were writing about me. There were stories. I got invited onto the APPG Parliamentary Committee for Mindfulness. I became chair of the British Mindfulness Association relatively recently, and then moved on from that. So I was suddenly getting something. I was a futures guy, right? So I was in this market called futures, but I also had this emotional intelligence, softer side that became more valuable for me within the world of business, than me just being a futures guy. So I'd found a different purpose. And, and people were writing to me saying that, you've changed my life. And all it was 1 hour. And I think about 40,000 people overall have gone through, because it wasn't just that business, I extended it beyond there. But about 40,000 people have gone through that type of training with me.
So you mix kind of psychology, NLP, which is natural language processing, special forces.
So all of that stuff, although, I wouldn't badge it at those things. To me, it's just the stuff I've done and developed over a market's career to be relevant to what I was doing at any given time. Stylized and me as the director of the content in a way to be based upon certain outcomes. So like, letting go and getting rid of stuff that just haunts you. I've got a process around that, being optimal for the start of your day. What does that mean? Being present into the market. Being quite humble as well, not being the loud, brash, as traders tend to be loud and brash. And the worst traders I've ever met are loud and brash. The best traders I've ever met are very humble. You wouldn't know they were a trader. Best ever trader I knew didn't even have screens. He just had a philosophy, stuck to it. And I ran the program for him. He just left it with me, and I just printing money every day. And I still to this day knew exactly what that system was. So, so I'd worked out this stuff. And it built a reputation. And as and right up to the board of the bank, so I was getting emails from Ross McEwen, CEO, and he'd come into the trading room of like 3,000 people. The only person he'd speak to, apart from the boss of the trading room, was me, because I had this thing that was so valuable to the human element of performance in a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment, which was markets. And I'd kind of solved it through my own direction. And so I bring that now into the world of coaching. So, moving down the timeline, I then was thinking, okay, Dumbo, you've got nearly 40 years of markets experience, and you've got nearly the same amount of experience of applying mindfulness-based approaches and things around that space to ultimate high performance environments in a very corporate world. Why don't you mix those two things together? Because that's
incredible, yeah,
super potent. And you got the credentials to go with it, so chair of the Mindfulness Association and the parliamentary stuff, and
sure.
the huge sort of feedback loops of what this does and why it does the good it does to people. So that was me then noticing that there was this fellow called Goldstein that was also a coach. And I thought, he's doing some stuff that's interesting. He's got Gestalt background, some behavior finance. He'd probably kill me for saying this. He's more of a foreign exchange trader. Or he traded futures. And I thought, after several pushes, I said, okay, we need to meet. We need to meet, because I think we're yin and yang in this world, and there's something that can come from this. And we booked a 1 hour lunch that lasted about 5 or 6 hours when it was realized that, let's kick this off and see where it goes. And one of the early things we decided upon was just starting a podcast. The AlphaMind Podcast was as much a platform for us understanding each other as we have these dialogues. And we had guests coming in, we had Lisa and all sorts of people, 150 odd episodes, I'm sure. Those that haven't seen it, please go and see the AlphaMind Podcast. But that allowed us to be a thought leader in a space where we had the authenticity and experience from the very sharpest end of being in the trading environment, and the pain of it, the opportunity of it. And we knew that there are other people offering this in the market, but there's no one anywhere near the level of experience that we have. Some people have, they even say in their remarks, I've witnessed non-farm payroll when I visited the trading room, and that's their experience of payroll. But you think, Christ, we were in it, and we can.
It's a powerful combination. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And tell me, just to bring it back to our listeners as well, you talk about kind of this mental presence, and maybe even like a 70% mental presence. How do you think traders listening to the podcast today, how do you think they can consistently achieve that themselves, or any tips that you could offer them?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. You want some hacks? So, right. Okay. So, at a fundamental level, before you do anything, you'll get the right rest, hydration, fresh air, connection to the outside world, social conversations. Remember that they're all really, really, really important. And remember there's life as well. You got your normal life. So having some degree of balance about that, and being precious about those things, and as a starting point, really, really important. And then you wake into your day. Going for a walk where let's say you do a 5-minute walk, just wherever you are, just get outside for 5 minutes and just connect to where you are. But don't think about the trading day. Just tune in to what you see, what you notice, what's changed from yesterday. If you can get out in nature, ideal. You'll see spring emerging. You'll see different birds. Some of the best traders I've known are bird watchers, because they have this forced hobby that gets them out into nature, paying attention and being curious to what's going on from a seasonal point of view. And it gives them great balance and a very refreshing end to their day to go and do something else. So to start the day, obviously you have to have the right kind of breakfast, get yourself set up from a hydration point of view. A very good way of telling your mind that you're now ready for the market again, from one of the best traders I ever knew, was that have a pencil and blank piece of paper and sharpen the pencil as a mind hack to say, I'm now ready for the market. And having a blank sheet of paper is having a beginner's mind, because what's about to happen has never happened before. So many people kind of structure, I'm going to buy here, I'm going to sell there. And, even in the shower in the morning, they're thinking about their trading day, about where they're going to win and where they're going to, do this, that, and the other. Don't do that. Just be present to the day. And be accepting that there are things that you're not going to know. Never going to know.
Yeah.
Stuff going on that alien to you, and be accepting to having an attitude of just seeing how things evolve. But of course, you need to have a plan and about why. Well, what's my intention for being a trader? What are my expectations? What product am I trading? How am I accessing the market? So there's some fundamental things to, even before you start the trading journey, you need to ask, well, what am I trading and why am I trading it? Do I understand the ebb and flow and the nuance of that product as a personality, and there may be some seasonality to it, the way it behaves during the day, when it goes fast, what does it do? How far does it tend to go? You need to understand those things. So doing the sort of the hard work of understanding product, the thing you're getting involved with risk is before all this. So if you've not done that, just take a step back and think, okay, why am I trading it? Oh, because my buddy's trading it. Well, there's lots of stuff you can trade out there. That you may not be trading the most optimal thing aligned to your own preferred risk. So ask yourself that question. Why am I trading? What am I trading? And, what is accepting, good target trade for the things that I want to put as, a profit target? What's my risk reward against, the stop level? And how do I do that? And then how do I access the market? What platform? There's lots of platforms out there. I work from the pro world, so I was trading the market. There's lots of people accessing the market that's not necessarily the market. It's a spread around the market.
Absolutely.
Right? So that becomes a stumbling block, but you're already offside to the market, because you have to spread yourself in and spread yourself out. So you need to think about that. So your venue of market access is important. We haven't even started the day yet.
This is the thing, right? You're talking a lot about pre-market, or how to get yourself in the right frame of mind to get yourself ready to hit the markets and have the right mindset for that. But going into the market on a day and maybe having a bad day, and I think this is the key for so many traders, is understanding when you're down, how to get out of that, and how the mentality plays into that. And I kind of wanted to bring up something that, we watched the Masters recently, right? We saw Rory McIlroy win the Masters, and on the very first hole of the last round, he had like a double bogey, and when he came off and won, and afterwards he had an interview, it's really interesting to see and understand his psychology, because I think the whole elite level of sports people really plays into how other people can try to have that same kind of similar mindset. And he was like, it's probably the best thing that happened to me was having that, because all of a sudden the pressure was off me.
Yes, I agree. And he was very humble. You could see, Bryson turning up. He was high-fiving everybody, and the gladiators turned up. And, he was already trying to win it in his head before he'd actually played the game. And I think he complained afterwards that Rory didn't speak to him, right? And I thought, so Bryson's playing golf, thinking, why isn't Rory speaking to me? That's why Bryson's golf fell apart, clearly, because he was paying attention to Rory. Rory was in the zone. He was focused. He was humble. He was on process. He was, I think, knowing that he would make mistakes. You're never going to get a perfect round, and accepting and recovering. His recovery was good. I mean, I think, when he chipped into the brook, that was
13. Yeah.
But then he bent a 7-iron round a tree on the 15th or whatever it was, and put it in 5 foot.
Yeah.
That's recovery.
Yeah.
So this ability to perform, I think, is very much linked to how fast you can recover from a setback. Djokovic recovery, Djokovic, Federer, those sorts of people, they've got the recovery right. So, and it's the awareness of, something's happened. What did I learn? Move on. I'm resetting myself mentally, almost expecting that, a market is going to give you disappointment regularly, and expecting that and accepting that is really important. And having a and almost a hack mentally of just, I accept that. That's what I'm here for. It's going to happen. And how do I recover? Now, one way of recovering is to change your state. So if you're sitting down staring at your screen and you've gone through this process, stand up and go for a bloody walk. Walk to the loo, and as you're walking to the loo, don't think about the trade, just the sensation of walking. When you get loose, you're faced with cold water because it wakes up the vagus nerve. That triggers the gut-brain thing to get yourself back into some sort of zone. Get yourself outside for a break. Ironically, as you know, I've talked about it several times on other podcasts, that I had a massive client once, and they were trying to work out who the most stressed people were in their business. It was the smokers. It was the smokers still going out regularly for a break and having a connection with the fresh air, although they were smoking, having a social conversation that changed their state. They didn't have to ask for it either. There was a cultural acceptance. If you're a smoker, you guess I'm going for a smoke.
Yeah.
No one would say, no, you're not.
Yeah.
But if you ask for a break as a normal member of staff, you're tired, get on with your work. What are you talking about? It's a good one you had today. Right? So I think you have to do a deal with yourself, saying that I need to do a deal with myself that says, if I go through something that's unpleasant, I need to learn from it. But I need to, at that point, to change my state, get up, go for a walk, have a coffee conversation, rock out over a song or something, come back refreshed. We've all got different ways of doing it. You can go and meditate. 2 minutes of meditation will get you very, very focused very quickly. I've got a visualization that that unfortunately is a little bit bespoke, so I can't share it because it is one of my critical weapons. But it's a release. It allows people to identify something and let it go if they're in a trauma situation where they're stuck in this loop that Goldstein must have talked about, where you just can't release from this. Right. This going from outcome to act and outcome to act, and you just get literally burnt out by the process. So I've got a methodology of releasing from that. But like I say, you can do it. It's recognizing that you're in a state that needs to be released is important. So, from a sports person point of view, it's recognizing that I need to recover from this, and I will now do this to recover. The difficulty with markets is that assuming it's a game becomes quite difficult, because it is more like war. It is more like that it's ongoing. It can be still super, super hot, even though you've come out of your position. Stuff is still going on. So it's being diligent and disciplined enough to say to yourself, even I know there's stuff going on, I still need to have that micro break, to get myself back to then seeing the next opportunity, even though you're walking away from the market. It's really, really important that these micro pauses become part of your own culture of you managing you, so that you just, it's a bit like having a mobile phone where your batteries drop into like 5%, and we're going, you start getting super stressed by it. Measure yourself in that way. Just think, I'm exhausted, and yet I'm looking to perform. So there's no relationship to either of those things. They're not interconnected. You cannot perform if you're exhausted. So you've got to think, how do I rebuild that battery up so I'm open and available to see and to configure the next complex opportunity, to de-stress and to be calm and collective and controlled, to then go about the plan of executing the next opportunity. Because you won't do that effectively if you haven't gone through that sort of reset and recalibration. So that's what I'd learned to do for moments where, and you're going to face trauma. Let's face it, you're going to face trauma and things that you're not going to like. But if you know you've got a tool to deal with it, or an attitude of an approach to deal with it, you become much more comfortable when trauma appears.
Sure.
Because you know what to do with it. And that is an absolute advantage to anyone that can solve that when the rest of your peers are trading the same market. If you're the one that's super calm, in control, really curious with an open mind to what's evolving, to be able to be comfortable facing the complexity of markets with an intelligent brain engaged, because when you're under stress, your amygdala is engaged, which is basically you've turned yourself into a Neanderthal trying to work out.
You're going to lose your trading edge, right? I mean,
you've lost your edge.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
if you're rating yourself against the edge of others, you have a tactical advantage if your edge is the best it can be. knowing that everyone else seems to be relatively stressed and unmanaged, which is the state of the market, even in the professional world.
What's the difference between, would you say, from like retail traders in the market to a high performing hedge fund manager, and how they deal with things differently? Like, can both sides of this, or both types of people, can they have the same mentality? Can they get into that same, especially for retail traders going into like full-time trading, especially who rely on that money?
Well, I've got an example. I've got one of my best clients is a retail trader. Trying not to give too much away. He's not that old. I suspect he's got at least a 10-digit value. Maybe more than that. Maybe 11-digit value. So it is ultra high net worth, but he's humble. I mean, it's just the humble, but he has a desire to learn and a desire to achieve mastery, and he's got a pursuit of mastery, and he has a relentless pursuit of improvement as his discipline. And he works with me to just keep on refining that edge and broaden it. So it broadens beyond trading, of course, because when you're of that value, there are grander things going on that might be initiatives you want to be attaching yourself to as different, more purposeful opportunities. So it opens different doors, and I'm his sort of guide, mentor, coach to open those doors and to explore those directions, as well as him managing, to be as best as possible for his trading world. And that's somebody that's not a hedge fund manager, but could absolutely exist in the hedge fund space at a very senior level, and you wouldn't be able to tell them apart.
That's awesome. And the funny thing is, like, when we look across some of the elite sports people, going back to it again, even to the golf reference, I think it was McIlroy, he put a red dot on his glove. And what that done was, as soon as he looked down, and that triggered something different in his mind, and he used psychologists to help him to deviate away from.
I'll give you another hack. This is an interesting hack, and we might get some of these stress balls made. But assume this is a stress ball, okay?
It's got any logos, no?
It's something I picked up in some event. But don't worry about that. There'll be one done with the AlphaMind on. I like, and I've done this for another client, where I wrote the word breath on here. Guess breath, right? And I got him to put it next to his screen, right? And I said, and I learned this from the Plum Village monks. So I went on a retreat. It was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done in my life, but I put up with it because I wanted to expose myself to that world, to kind of understand some of the things I did. And most of it was a bit awkward, but some of the things was interesting. And what they were saying was that the brain kind of likes things in threes.
Yeah.
So, and they explain this, that if you can do something physical linked to the breath, so when you breathe in, to be squeezing into your hands like that, and as you breathe out, to release. And I thought that was a very good practice. So I was doing a lot of stuff with the government at that time. I thought I like that. I think I'm going to modify that. So I just thought, can you imagine if a trader has this breath written on a stress ball, and he's got it beside his screen, and he gets this moment where, that moment, and everyone knows what that moment is, right? And the philosophy is, you reach for your breath. So you reach for the breath, and as you breathe in, you squeeze in to the ball, and as you breathe out, you release, and you feel the whole of your upper back released. And of course, that increases blood and oxygen to the brain. It kind of settles you down. But do that 3 times as a rescue breath.
Yep.
Is a very, very important hack that I'm sharing with you. And I've shown it to many people. And one fella that I wrote breath on, breath disappeared because he was using it so much. And somebody else was saying that, I was coaching recently, said, I used it 10 times yesterday. Because that's how difficult yesterday was. Yeah. But it allowed them to recognize and accept the fact that there are moments you need to manage. And it was within arm's reach of them picking up something so simple as a stress ball or a squashy, one of those squashy tennis balls for slow tennis, whatever they call it. And to have something to physically, to remind him to breathe into the squeeze and to breathe out on a release. And of course, there's a physicality. benefit from your structure.
Plus, just doing something different, it just changes, switches something.
It's the Rory red dot thing. It's like, notice I've got that. If it gets difficult, I've got that, and I'm comfortable walking into this difficulty, because if it gets difficult, I can release from it and reset.
Sure.
And I think that's genius. I think, that's genius.
And tell me, right? So obviously there's a huge rise in algorithm and AI driven trading. How is that going to change things going into the future? Obviously, will it ever really trickle down to the retail traders properly in a way? I mean, like we're building AI driven tools, but we're a long way off in terms of getting to a point where we can get anywhere near what the hedge funds and the information that they have. What we're trying to do personally is just trying to give a small edge, just a confirmation. We don't want to give signals directly to people. We want to try and to go, okay, here's some extra information to give you some more confirmations that could potentially help your decision-making process. But
yeah, well, I think there's potential for it to investigate the market on your behalf to some extent.
That's exactly it, right? It's
and to maybe give some sort of order to that investigation that allows you to make sense of something quicker than ever before. Now, I'll give you an example. Wouldn't this say the book I'm writing with Dr. Ken Long? We've got 1 million words of archive, right? 1 million words that we're trying to plow through and make sense of. So I gave the brief to it to my son Julian, and Julian is a strategic head of strategic accounts for Unity, which is a software company for gaming and all sorts of things. But he's very into AI, and I think he'd be moved. I don't know what his trajectory is, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if he continues to flourish in the AI space. So he was around for a Sunday lunch and said, so we doing this and that. Okay, I've got this brief. We've got this 2-page brief that we've done for the book. Yes, I'll send it to me. So I sent it to him. He happened to have his laptop with him because he was going to the States the next day. 6 minutes later, he sent me a podcast of 2 people talking about that brief and beyond that brief. And it was the best trading podcast I've ever listened to. In 6 minutes.
Yep.
It sent a Word doc into the Fugazi world of AI. And I've suddenly got 2 people talking about the brief in a way that I've never heard before, using words that I thought that I'm going to remember that the phraseology.
Yeah.
And the new AI is turning up every week, and we've not even got to where quantum turns up. I mean, quantum turns up when the whole global capacity of computers is available in your palm of your hand or something. I mean, stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, you asked the question. The answer is I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I think when these things start to network and speak to each other, there's a different level of intelligence that emerges. I'd say for their own little world that you can control, ask it a stupid question. I mean, ask I don't know what it is, frankly. I mean, but I know there's Grok 3 and there's all sorts of things out there. Just throw out a stupid question you think is relevant to your trading and just see what it says. So, and use that as a piece of intelligence to inform you about maybe things that you've not thought about before. And maybe things that add to your edge as you start to work out opportunity, or even how you manage things, or even how you manage yourself. Just ask it.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of spiraled from something that I was looking to do myself in terms of getting information quicker to be able to make decisions and help me not to tell me what to do, but to give me the information in the right order. Like I
agree.
Our tools kind of go out to like 100 different news sources. It goes to the charts. It knows and understands how I look at the charts. It then goes off and pulls liquidity data and all sorts of information from every point.
Crazy. And it's doing it in seconds. Yeah.
And within that, I can get an answer to the P&Ls of companies. I can see, I can see everything and everything within a split second. And because it's all plugged into everywhere now,
I'd say don't get carried away though. I mean, the thing is, it's still a fundamental, not I'm telling you, I'm just saying in general, still keep your stuff as simple as possible.
100%. 100%.
So process and approach, keep as simple as possible, but be as well informed as you can be and tune in to the most appropriate content for what you're trying to do.
100%.
There's a lot of noise out there that may not be giving you the right lead. So that you need this sort of a sense check on, okay, calibrating the quality and thinking, yeah, I want to focus on this stuff. I'm not going to focus on that because that's just noise.
100%. So to close it off, it's been a fantastic conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. Tell me, what legacy are you hoping to leave behind in the trading world once you kind of step aside? I know you have got a book coming, and when that book comes out, I want to be the first to know that it's available, because I'm definitely going to read it, and we'll certainly let all of our listeners
appreciate the pressure
know about it as well.
Well, I like this legacy of being the bloke that made a difference to the trusted partner for many people that are being serious about their performance. My purpose changed when I was developing this when I saw a purpose change, when I positioned mindfulness into a business and drove change, where people would send me emails saying, I'm now in a more positive place. Thank you. Getting something like that through and knowing that I can help people through trauma, but also to give them the best possible opportunity to perform at their best for whatever they're doing in life. If I can be the person that has a reputation for doing that, then that's good enough for me.
That's a pretty good answer. And on that note, thanks again, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. And so we must have you on our podcast at some point.
I look forward to it. Thanks a million, Mark.
Right. Take care.